They ignored the black adoptive sister, until at the funeral a letter revealed.
Hello everyone, enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch.
The sky over New York was dark and gloomy. Rows of luxury cars lined up outside the cemetery gates to bid farewell to Matthew Grant, a renowned billionaire, one of the economic icons of America. Amara stood silently among the crowd, her hands clutching a simple bouquet of white flowers, her eyes filled with a profound sadness. No one could grasp what was truly going through the mind of the only black woman in the Grant family and the one drawing every curious gaze. Amara, a gentle voice spoke beside her. It was Karen, her adoptive mother and Matthew's second wife. Don't grieve too much. Your father is at peace now. Amara pressed her lips together and nodded. She knew that if anyone in the family still had a shred of affection for her, it was Karen. But ever since Matthew fell ill, even that connection had faded, becoming too fragile to hold on to. As the ceremony neared its end, the priest turned to the family row and spoke. If any loved one would like to say a few final words for Mr. Matthew Grant, please come forward. Amara gripped her bouquet tighter and took a deep breath. This was her last chance. Even knowing she wasn't welcome, she still wanted to speak. She had written a few lines in advance, just a sincere farewell, nothing grand or presumptuous. She stepped slowly toward the microphone, avoiding the many eyes fixed on her. If I may, she said, her voice trembling. But just as her hand touched the microphone, a cold voice rang out. That won't be necessary. The crowd turned. Charles, Matthew's eldest son and official heir, stepped out from the front row, his expensive black suit hugging his figure. He gave a slight smile, but his eyes were as cold as steel. My father's funeral is not a place for outsiders to speak. A soft chuckle echoed from somewhere. Amara froze. She stared at Charles, unable to believe what she was hearing. Charles, I just wanted to say a few words to honor him, Amara whispered, almost pleading. Lucy, the youngest daughter, draped in a luxurious fur shawl, looked her up and down before delivering a slap of words. What value could your words possibly have? Who do you think you are? Amara stepped back, but still tried to keep her voice steady. I'm Mr. Matthew's daughter. That sentence was like throwing oil on a fire. An elderly guest, Diana Martin, a longtime friend of the family, frowned. Daughter? Since when? Charles turned to Diana and shrugged. My father was overly generous in his final years. Adoption was just charity. By now, murmurs were spreading through the crowd. Eyes filled with scrutiny, curiosity, and contempt sliced through Amara like cold blades. She turned to Karen, silently begging for help. But Karen, the woman who once held her as a child, once called her my little girl, lowered her head, avoiding her gaze. An icy silence fell. Amara lowered the microphone. Even the wind seemed to stop for a moment, giving way to the shame consuming her. Please, return to your seat, Charles said. His tone was gentler now, but devoid of any warmth. Amara turned away, each step like walking on thorns. A woman near her, Mary Ellis, Charles's ex-girlfriend, murmured just loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. An outsider thinking she belongs to the family. How embarrassing. Soft laughter followed. Amara's skin burned not from anger, but from humiliation. Every whisper felt like it was incinerating whatever dignity she had left. When she returned to her seat, another woman, her cousin Laura, had already taken it. Amara stood still for a moment, unsure of what to do. No one offered to move. No one asked if she was okay. She was invisible. A few moments later, Lucy approached, raising an eyebrow. Your seat's over there, she said, pointing to the back row reserved for the funeral staff. Amara looked in the direction of her finger. There stood several employees dressed in black uniforms, quietly observing the ceremony. Lucy. I'm family. I grew up in that mansion, ate at the same table, called him Dad like everyone else. Lucy smirked, responding in a flat tone. That was just his game. You think he really saw you as blood? Charles cut in, his voice curt. Stop making this dramatic. Our father just passed away. Show some respect. She looked at the two people she once called brother and sister, now looming shadows suffocating her spirit. She bit her lip, saying nothing more. Silently, she stepped away from the family's section and walked toward the service staff seating area. On her way, a deep male voice spoke. It was Benjamin Allen, an old business associate of Matthew's. That girl's adopted? I thought she was just the help. Another woman, Paula Thomas, dressed in noble purple, smiled mockingly. Pretty enough, but doesn't really fit in at this funeral. They both chuckled softly. Amara didn't look back. She didn't need to see to know how sharp their smiles were. When she sat in the last row, her hands trembled slightly. The laughter and whispers continued ahead. Amara looked toward her father's portrait, the man who once carried her on his shoulders, took her to piano lessons, who once told her, "You'll always be my pride." But here, among these people, she was nothing. A shadow. A stain. A charity case. She closed her eyes, squeezing the bouquet so tightly that petals fell to the cold ground. The ceremony concluded. Guests began standing up as the casket was prepared for transport. Family members were instructed to gather at the front to accompany the procession. Amara rose and walked quickly toward the Grant family section, the place where she once sat during her father's birthday parties, once known as the youngest daughter. She tried to stay composed. Even after being humiliated, she still believed her father, Matthew, had truly loved her. Even without shared blood, nearly 20 years of love couldn't be erased by a few cruel words. I'd like to stand with you, Mom, Amara said softly, her eyes on Karen, who stood near Charles and Lucy. Karen looked at her briefly, her gaze softening, but before she could respond, a strong hand grabbed Amara's wrist. What are you doing here? Lucy hissed, yanking her like a misbehaving child. I just want to say goodbye to Dad with everyone, Amara tried to explain as she was pulled away. Lucy didn't bother hiding her disdain. Her voice rose, loud enough for guests to turn their heads. These seats are for family. You're not on the list. Go somewhere else. Amara tried to pull her arm back, but Lucy wouldn't let go. Let me go, you're hurting me. Charles stepped in, his voice still cold. Don't cause a scene at the funeral, Amara. You've done enough already. A scene? I just want to be near my father one last time, she cried, her voice cracking. An older man approached Samuel Rivers, a former colleague of Matthew's. He looked at them and asked quietly. Is something wrong? Charles quickly smiled. No, just a little misunderstanding. My sister's a bit overwhelmed with emotion. Samuel nodded, though his eyes seemed doubtful. But Amara knew no one here would take her side. No one. Lucy finally let go, but not without pointing to the back row. You can stand over there, with the staff. That suits you better. A quiet chuckle came from Margaret Sullivan's two daughters as they walked past. Sullivan sneered. Probably thought she belonged with the models from those charity ads. Or a receptionist flown in from the Caribbean, Agnes added. Amara stood frozen for a moment, then turned away. Her heels clicked against the stone floor like echoes of unspoken shame. She passed the main row, where Karen still stood silent as a statue, avoiding her gaze for a second time. At the back, she sat beside an old maid named Clara, a kind woman who had worked at the mansion for over 15 years. Miss Amara. Clara began, but Amara shook her head. She didn't want anyone to defend her. She was used to silence. She feared if someone spoke for her, they might lose their job like she was a disease. Soon, whispers grew louder. Phrases meant to be hushed, but just loud enough for her to hear. She still thinks she's family. Who let her sit in the Grant row? Heard she was adopted just for media attention back then. That black girl? Yeah, I heard the same thing. Amara gripped her dress tightly, eyes on her father's casket being readied for burial. She remembered him walking her to school, their classical music nights, the birthdays when he made her flan by hand. That was real. That love was real. But those memories were now being strangled, piece by piece, by the contempt and venom of the very people who once called her niece. Charles stepped up to speak one last time before the procession. His voice rang through the speakers. My father was a great man, a devoted father, a brilliant businessman. The legacy he leaves behind is not just wealth, but honor. The Grant family has always upheld the value of tradition above all else. Lucy cut in with a burst of theatrical tears. Dad taught us to live with kindness, to value the true meaning of blood ties. Hearing that, Amara clenched her hands so tightly that her nails dug into her skin. A server approached the row where she sat, offering a bottle of water. It was James, someone who had grown up with her in the mansion but was now working the event. He lowered his head as he handed her the bottle. You okay, Amara? He asked quietly, his voice sincere. I'm fine, she replied quickly, her eyes still fixed on the casket. James seemed like he wanted to say more, but walked away as soon as he noticed Charles casting a disapproving glance their way. He understood around here, even showing a hint of kindness toward Amara was something not allowed. A few moments later, funeral music began to play, and the priests initiated the final rites. People rose to their feet, but Amara didn't dare move forward. She looked around, no one turned to look for her, no one asked, "Where's Amara?" No one offered her a place. She stood, blending into the crowd behind the nameless, the powerless, the ones with no reserved seats of honor. The ones no one photographed, no one addressed by title. A light drizzle began to fall. Black umbrellas opened to shield the well-dressed in their designer suits and gowns. Amara had no umbrella. She hadn't brought a coat either. It was cold. But she didn't shiver. The numbness in her chest was colder than any breeze. Amara, a voice called from behind. It was Mr. Alexander Jameson, her late father's former personal secretary. He gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Would you like to move up front? You could walk with the family group. She looked at him, her eyes drained of hope. What family, sir? I'm not allowed. I wasn't invited. My name isn't on the list. Mr. Jameson gently squeezed her shoulder, a silent apology on behalf of others. But even he couldn't bring her forward. Like everyone else, all he could offer was quiet sympathy. As the procession began to move toward the hearse, Amara remained at the very end of the line. The rain began to fall harder. Soft laughter echoed from under distant umbrellas. She really has no shame. First she wanted to give a speech, now she wants a front row seat. No one even knows who her real father is, probably had Matthew wrapped around her finger. Amara took a deep breath. Even though no one was watching, she stood tall. For her father. For the genuine memories they shared. Even if everyone else tried to erase her from the Grant legacy, she knew that in at least one heart, she had once been called daughter. After the somber burial ceremony in the cold New York rain, most of the guests were invited back to the Grant mansion on the Upper East Side for a post-funeral tea. Though it was meant to be a memorial gathering, the atmosphere was unusually lavish: crystal chandeliers, pristine white tablecloths, sparkling champagne glasses, and a constant murmur of laughter that clashed with the occasion's somber tone. Amara entered with wet shoulders and a dress stained with cemetery mud. She looked completely out of place in the sea of elegance, like a dark blot no one wanted to acknowledge. She hesitated, ready to turn back, but a young server, Daniel, a boy who used to play piano with her when they were children, whispered quietly. You can come in. I think Mr. Matthew would have wanted you here. She nodded and slowly stepped into the main hall. Every gaze turned toward her, not out of mourning, but at the presence of the black girl among the elite white Grant family. Look, a man whispered to his wife, she's still here. No one invited her. What nerve, the woman replied, taking a delicate sip of champagne. Amara heard every word. Quietly, she tucked herself into a corner near the bookshelf. That room had once been the place where her father taught her how to read. Every painting, every book felt familiar, yet now they all seemed cold, like the eyes of ancestors in the portraits watching her from the walls. A group of women nearby started chatting, making no effort to lower their voices. Lucy said the girl tried to apply for school in Chicago, even asked for funding from the family trust. Seriously? How shameless. I heard Mr. Matthew only adopted her because of a racial discrimination lawsuit. He needed a humanitarian gesture to quiet the press. Right, just a PR move. Look at what she's wearing. Old dress, wet shoes. Who shows up to a funeral like that? Amara gripped her glass of water tightly, trying not to let her shoulders shake. Every word they uttered was like a needle, not loud, but each one pierced deeper into her pride. From across the room, Lucy approached, her arm wrapped around her new boyfriend Ryan Vance, a young businessman known for his wild lifestyle. "Babe," Lucy said loudly, enough for Amara to hear, "I bet Amara only came to see who inherits what." Ryan laughed and raised an eyebrow. "She thinks she's getting a cut." Lucy feigned surprise. "Well, maybe she hoped Dad left something like, to Amara, 3 instant noodle cups and an old piano." They both burst into laughter. A few guests nearby joined in, emboldened now that it was clear mockery was acceptable. Amara froze. She had played that piano for her father every night. It wasn't a priceless item, but it held memories. Now, it had become a punchline. Nearby, Teresa Gaines, a close friend of Aunt Karen, turned to her husband and asked, "I still can't understand why Matthew adopted her. This is a prestigious family. We can't have a child with no blood relation, Anne." She didn't finish the sentence, but her glance at Amara's skin said it all. Charles was then standing with several business associates, including Matt Raines, the CEO of a major medical device corporation. Hearing Amara's name, Mr. Raines glanced in her direction. "Charles," he asked, "is that girl his biological daughter?" Charles sipped his drink and gave a slight smirk. "No. My father had moments of strong emotion. But it was nothing more than kindness." "Oh, so she ends up with nothing?" Matt asked. "Nothing but the last name Garcia, on a birth certificate," Charles replied coldly. Nearby, Paula Monroe, a well-known journalist, quietly jotted a few notes into her small notepad. Amara realized that by tomorrow, the news would be full of headlines about the funeral. And once again, she would be nothing more than a strange story from the Grant family. She stepped back, intending to slip out into the garden when a soft voice called, "Amara, wait a second." It was Emily, the only cousin who had ever lent her a dress for a formal party when they were kids. Now a successful interior designer, she stepped forward, her voice low but full of sympathy. "Don't mind what everyone's saying. I know your dad loved you very much. Then why is no one speaking up?" Amara asked, still looking toward the door. Emily bit her lip, then sighed. "Because they're afraid of losing their share. Everyone's waiting for the will." Though the words were honest, they felt like scissors cutting through the last thread of trust. Amara nodded and left the room. She stepped into the garden where her father used to host summer barbecues. The orange trees were still full, releasing a sweet scent that reminded her of better, peaceful days. A voice spoke behind her. "You shouldn't be here." It was Lucy, her tone as cold as always. "Dad just died." "This is my home," Amara said, trying to stay calm. "Your dad?" Lucy stepped closer, laughing coldly. "A rich, famous white man calling you his daughter? You actually believe that?" Amara was silent. She had believed it. Deeply. Lucy continued. Maybe he pitied you. But never forget Dad always told us blood is everything. And no matter how hard you try, you'll never be blood. You can think what you want, Amara said, but Dad loved me. You can't erase that. Lucy burst out laughing. Then wait till the will is read. You'll see just how much love you really got. Amara turned away, unwilling to argue anymore. But even from a distance, she could still hear whispers, this time from younger guests, friends of Charles and Lucy. She went to that international school, right? Wonder who paid for that. Probably charmed Mr. Matthew into blessing her. Ugh, stop. Don't taint this tea party with trash. Each word was a cut. Each glance a blade. Amara didn't cry. She just stood silently among the orange trees, the cold wind threading through her tangled hair. And she realized she no longer had anywhere to call home. On the day the will was to be read, the Grant family mansion still gleamed with its usual opulence, red carpets rolled out, golden light pouring from chandeliers, illuminating a dazzling space. Outside, the sun blazed in a harsh summer heat, but inside, the air was thick, like everything was bracing for a silent war no one could quite predict. Amara stood quietly by the window, gazing out at the vast garden. Though she had been part of this family for so many years, she could never get used to this feeling, the feeling of being ostracized, of being blatantly pushed aside. Every laugh, every look of contempt from the family members felt like a blade slicing into her heart. Everyone was gathered in the main living room, waiting for the will to be read. Family members like Karen, Aunt Margaret, Charles, and Lucy all looked anxious. Everyone knew the official heirs would be one of the two siblings. As for Amara, they saw her as nothing more than a burden, a charitable token their father had placed into this family. Amara, do you want to come in? Karen asked gently, her voice soft but full of hesitation. She was the only one who still treated Amara with a semblance of kindness, but even that couldn't change anything in this ruthless system. No, Amara replied evenly. I don't want to hear it. Karen said nothing more and turned away, sadness clouding her eyes. Amara understood she was tired of fighting a battle she was never going to win. In truth, she had never been on the winning side in this family. Just a few minutes later, Stephen Allen, the family attorney who had worked with the Grants for years, entered the room. A middle-aged man with cold, piercing eyes and hands that always remained stiff and formal, he exuded professionalism. Everyone stood as he entered, tension rising like a fog in the air. We can begin, Stephen said, his gaze sweeping across the room. Charles stood nearby, gripping a glass of red wine, glancing briefly at Karen and Amara. His eyes seemed to seek some kind of permission from Amara, but she didn't look back. She stood still, listening as the lawyer's voice echoed through the hushed space. Stephen opened the folder and began reading the will. His tone was flat and emotionless, which only made everything feel colder, more detached. With all remaining assets and inheritance, I, Matthew Grant, bequeath everything to my children, Charles Grant and Lucy Grant, Stephen stated, his voice like a hammer pounding straight into Amara's chest. Each word of the will was a slap in her face. She stood there, silent, her heart filling with a deep, aching sorrow. The words she had once hoped to hear, some acknowledgement or token left for her, vanished into the air. She was not part of this family. She was an outsider, a pawn that had lost its use. And, Stephen continued, all private assets, including liquid funds, real estate, and stocks, shall be equally divided between my children. All financial decisions will be managed by Charles and Lucy. The room remained silent, save for the sound of the lawyer's voice. Across from him, Amara felt like a nameless shadow. Everything was clear now. She had nothing, not even a mention. Some guests exchanged glances, as if they had already expected this outcome. A few scoffed, others sighed, but no one said a word. Everyone was too used to this kind of exclusion. No one was surprised to see Amara left out. Thank you, everyone, Stephen said as he closed the folder. That concludes all formal procedures. Charles stepped forward and lightly patted Lucy on the shoulder, a triumphant smile on his face. Not a single comforting glance was cast in Amara's direction. She looked at them, feeling like an outsider, an unnecessary extra. She stood there, wondering if she had ever truly belonged to this family at all. Lucy turned toward her with a cold smile. "Honestly, Amara, you don't need to be involved in this anymore. It's all been settled. You have nothing to worry about." "I just wanted something," Amara said, her voice trembling. "Just a little. But I got nothing." Charles laughed out loud, clapped his hands, and said, "Maybe you should find a job or something. Stop hoping for handouts. Seriously." Lucy patted Amara on the shoulder, her voice dripping with mockery. "Let it go, Amara. Don't hurt yourself more than you already have. You have nothing. We are the real heirs." Amara stood still, her heart feeling like it had stopped beating. She wanted to walk away, to push all those cruel words out of her life, but every step felt impossibly heavy. She walked out of the Grant mansion's living room, her steps sluggish. The door closed behind her as if sealing off every remaining path in her life. She didn't want to see those cold faces anymore. She didn't want to hear those heartless insults. She didn't even have the strength to cry. The pain had numbed her, turned her into an invisible shadow. Suddenly, a voice from behind startled her. "Amara, where are you going?" She turned. It was Charles. "I don't think you should be going anywhere," Charles said as he approached. "What do you want?" Amara asked, her voice stiffening. "What you were hoping for you didn't get. You have no claim to the will, and you have no right to stay here any longer." Amara remained silent. She knew it wasn't out of love that Matthew had adopted her. It had all been a game, a way for this family to mask its darker sides. She had been a tool, used so they could feel more charitable. Charles stepped closer, his eyes drilling into her, full of disdain. "You don't deserve the Grant name. You're just an adopted child, a possession in everyone's eyes. You have no worth." Amara swallowed back her tears, but her chest tightened painfully. She could hear her own breathing grow ragged, her knees weakening. "You're an outsider," Charles continued, his voice laced with challenge. "My father, my mother, they all saw you as nothing more than a tool. A mistake they would never admit to. Do you understand?" Amara said nothing. She wanted to walk away, but everything felt like it was holding her back. She wanted to escape this place, escape this family, but she couldn't. Every step she tried to take was watched, judged. "You know, Amara," Charles sneered, "you only survive because of our pity. You're an outsider and always will be. You'll never belong in this family." A soft laugh came from a distance. It was Lucy. She slowly approached, her eyes gleaming in the light. "She's right, Amara. You're just a discarded child, a humanitarian stunt my father pulled in the past. Now you understand, don't you?" Amara couldn't speak. Every word they said felt like a knife stabbing her heart, but she couldn't fight back. She simply had nothing left to defend herself with. She had tried, had believed in the love of this family, but now, it was all revealed as a lie. "Thank you," Amara said dryly but firmly, "for opening my eyes." Charles and Lucy exchanged a glance, their expressions free of worry. They smiled, as if they had just claimed a great victory. "Go, Amara," Charles said. "No one needs you here." Amara turned and walked away, but as she passed them, she heard Lucy whisper, just loud enough for her to hear. "You really think you'll ever find a place in this world? You'll always just be a shadow." As she left the garden, Amara felt completely drained. She passed through the mansion gates, and no one noticed her presence. She walked into the rain, without stopping, without looking back. After all, this was no longer her home. When she arrived at her small apartment, no one was waiting for her. No one stood at the door. No one asked how she was. No one congratulated her on returning. All she had was an empty bed and cold walls. Walls she had once believed would protect her, but now, they were nothing more than unfeeling barriers that couldn't hold back the loneliness engulfing her. She quietly stripped off her soaked clothes and stepped into the bathroom. Under the stream of cold water, she felt nothing but emptiness. The pain that wouldn't fade, the insults from those who used to be her family, they circled her, clinging like shadows she couldn't shake off. The sound of her phone ringing interrupted her thoughts. Amara glanced at the screen, and a name appeared, Anna Grant. Her cousin. The only person in the family she had once believed truly understood her. She didn't know what to do, but in the end, she answered. "Amara, can I talk to you for a minute?" Anna's voice was slightly hesitant but clear. Amara took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "What do you want?" "Where are you?" "I'll come to you," Anna said, her voice laced with concern. Amara felt a twinge of irritation, a spark of frustration, but she replied anyway. "There's no need. I'm fine." But Anna didn't let it go. "Amara, don't be like this. I know you're hurting. But you have to understand, life isn't always fair. You can't stay the daughter of this family forever. You need to accept reality." Amara stayed silent. She knew her cousin meant to comfort her, but those words only added to the pain. She didn't want any more false sympathy. "I don't need pity," she said. "I just want to live my life my way." "But why is that so hard? Why has everything gone so wrong?" Anna was quiet for a moment, then responded softly. "Amara, you are part of this family no matter what. But you also need to understand, not everyone will accept you. Especially, our mother." "I know," Amara replied, her voice tightening. "I don't need their acceptance anymore. I'm tired of the lies and the fakery." "Amara," Anna's voice was apologetic, uncertain. "I'm truly sorry for everything. But you have to stay strong. Don't let people who aren't worth it hurt you." Amara sat silently, saying nothing. Yes, she had to be strong. But how do you stay strong when everything around you is crumbling? When even your own family turns their back on you? She hung up. The feeling of emptiness wrapped around her like fog. No one could understand what she was going through. No amount of comforting words could erase the truth. She had been cast aside, worthless in the eyes of the people she once called family. The next morning, Amara woke up early as usual, but today felt different. She stared at the mirror in front of her. Her hair was wet, tangled. She didn't have the strength to fix herself up. Everything inside her felt like ruins. She decided to go outside, not to escape, but simply to feel the world around her, to not feel like a prisoner in her apartment. She walked along the street, not knowing what she was looking for. Maybe freedom, or just some sign that she was still alive, that she still existed in this world. Then, as she passed a jewelry store, she caught her reflection in the glass. Her messy hair, her swollen eyes from crying, her tired face. She didn't recognize herself anymore. She felt like she didn't belong here, didn't belong anywhere. Just a shadow, a blurred image no one wanted. Right at that moment, her phone rang again. She looked at the screen and was stunned by the name, Lucy Grant. Amara hesitated, then picked up. Lucy's voice rang out immediately. "Amara, haven't you cleared your things yet? You know we don't want you here, right?" You heard the will loud and clear. Amara couldn't respond. She just listened to Lucy's voice, and then, her mocking laughter. A laugh full of scorn and cruelty. "You should go, Amara. Don't waste your time anymore. Even if you wanted to stay, no one wants you." "Thank you, Lucy," Amara said, her voice barely audible. "I'll go." Then she hung up. But in that moment, she didn't know where to go. She wandered the streets in the rain, walking like a ghost with no destination, no place to stop. The next day, as she passed a cafe, a voice called her name. She turned and saw James, an old friend from when they both lived in the Grant mansion. He had been the only one who treated her kindly in that house, but now, he too seemed like a stranger. "Amara, how are you?" James asked softly. "I'm fine," she replied, though the exhaustion hit her immediately. "Just, not okay. I know things haven't been easy for you, but you can start over. You don't have to face this alone," James said, his eyes full of sympathy. Amara gave a weak smile. "Thank you, James. But I don't know what I can even do anymore. It all feels too late." James looked at her with sadness. "You don't have to say that. There's still so much ahead of you. Don't let this pain drown you." Amara shook her head, then turned and walked away. As she returned to her apartment, she felt so tired she could barely keep walking. She didn't know what to do with all these emotions, didn't know how to face reality anymore. These past days, she had been running from her feelings. Everything from the funeral to the will, to Charles and Lucy's cruel words had been too much. She had endured for so many years, but now, she knew she had to rise. Not for an inheritance. Not for that family. But for herself. Amara deserved a new chance. She deserved to live her own life. She got up from the bed, stretched, and felt something shift inside her. Her eyes sparkled, and for a moment, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She opened her phone. A message from Stephen Allen, Matthew Grant's lawyer, was waiting. He had been checking in on her during the past days, not just for legal matters but out of genuine concern. "Amara, I have something important to share with you this morning. Please come to my office as soon as you can. Don't miss this opportunity." A wave of anticipation and curiosity rose in her chest. She couldn't imagine what Stephen might have to say, but it had to be something big. She got ready quickly, dressed simply but neatly, and left her apartment. Stephen's office was located in an older building, its entrance tucked behind shiny rows of glass doors. She stepped in, and immediately, Stephen rose to greet her, his eyes lighting up at the sight of her. "Good morning, Amara," Stephen said warmly. "Thank you for coming. I have something very important to tell you." Amara felt a vague tension settle in her chest. "Go ahead," she said. "I'm listening." "You didn't receive what you truly deserved from the Grant family," Stephen continued, "but there's something you don't know. Matthew Grant prepared a second will." Amara stared at him, her eyes suddenly filled with doubt and surprise. "A second will? But I thought everything was already settled with the first one." Stephen nodded, a slight smile forming on his face. "Yes, but Matthew didn't leave everything to Charles and Lucy. He left all of his personal assets, approximately $18 million, to you, Amara." Amara stood frozen. $18 million. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. Her eyes widened, and a tight, overwhelming feeling rose in her throat. "Mr. Matthew wrote in his handwritten letter, 'You are the only one who has truly loved me unconditionally.'" The lump in her throat grew stronger. She could no longer hold back the tears that welled up. She had never imagined that, in the end, she would receive such love and trust. She wasn't just acknowledged, she was respected. For all those years, she had tirelessly searched for affection from the family, but now, she realized Mr. Matthew had always loved her. "Is this really true?" Amara asked, her voice trembling. "It's absolutely true," Stephen replied with a nod. "Mr. Matthew loved you. And now, you will inherit all the personal assets he left behind." She sat down, feeling as though her heart had just been filled with light. She couldn't believe it. After everything that had happened, only now did she realize that someone had truly seen her, had truly considered her a part of this family. Stephen smiled, but his tone turned serious. "I know this will change many things in your life, Amara. But I also need you to understand this won't be easy. Charles and Lucy shouldn't know about this." Amara nodded, a new wave of determination rising inside her. She wasn't afraid of them anymore. They would have to pay for what they had done. I won't let them treat me like that anymore, she said firmly. I'll show them I have worth. Stephen looked at her, his eyes shining with trust. I know you will. But remember, Amara, this inheritance isn't everything. You need to clearly define your goals and follow your own path. Don't let anyone, especially the Grant family, make you feel small. Amara walked out of Stephen's office with a newfound strength. She knew today had changed everything. From this moment on, she would no longer be the forgotten girl in the shadows of the Grant family. She would never have to bow her head to Charles, Lucy, or anyone else in that family again. She had power now, and she wouldn't let anyone take it away. She walked out slowly, but each step carried a powerful resolve. $18 million. It wasn't the money that made her feel strong, it was the proof that she was worthy, that Mr. Matthew had loved and acknowledged her as an indispensable part of the family. Amara decided that she would do something big, not just for herself, but for all the abandoned children and those who had lived under the shadow of contempt. A charity named the Matthew Grant Foundation would be the first step. She would use that money to help those in need, especially children who had never had the chance to be loved and cared for, just like she once hadn't. When she returned to her apartment, Amara picked up her phone and called Ms. Karen, the only person who had ever shown true concern for her. Though she couldn't change everything, at least she was someone Amara could trust. Ms. Karen, I have something important to tell you, Amara said when Ms. Karen answered the call. Amara, how are you? Are you okay? Ms. Karen's voice came through, full of worry but also warmth. I'm okay now, Amara replied, her throat tightening. I just received some wonderful news. My foster father left me a large inheritance. Ms. Karen was silent for a moment, then gently said, So you found out. I always believed Mr. Matthew saw that you were worthy. Amara didn't say anything, just felt the warmth in her words. Yes, Ms. Karen had always been there for her, even when everyone else had turned their backs. I'm going to start a charity foundation. I want to help kids like me, those without families or opportunities. And I won't let anyone crush me ever again, Amara said with conviction. That's a wonderful idea, Amara. You've always had a kind heart. I believe you'll make it happen, Ms. Karen said, her voice filled with encouragement. When the call ended, Amara felt like a new light had just entered her life. Everything was going to be different now. She was no longer the girl from the past, no longer the outsider. She had power, and she was going to take control of her life. A few days later, Amara met with Stephen again to begin the formal procedures for the charity foundation. He helped her organize an elegant launch event. She invited all her friends, partners, and members of the media to attend. On the day of the inauguration, the grand hall was beautifully decorated, with portraits of Mr. Matthew hanging on the walls, a tribute to the man who had always believed in her. Everything was meticulously arranged, and Amara stood there, under the bright lights, feeling truly seen. As the event began, attendees filed in one by one. Amara could feel the change. They no longer looked at her the same way. She was no longer the adopted daughter of the Grant family. They saw her as a woman of worth, of power, of purpose. And that made her proud. A young reporter approached her with a smile and began a conversation. We're honored to be here for the launch of your foundation. Could you tell us more about its goals and why you decided to create it? Amara looked at him and smiled softly. The Matthew Grant Foundation was born out of a desire to do something meaningful to help children who never had a chance, those abandoned by society. We all deserve a chance to be loved and cared for. I want to bring hope to those who need help. The reporter jotted down her words quickly and followed up. This sounds amazing. But how do you handle the difficulties within your family now that you've decided to start this foundation? Amara didn't hesitate. She answered directly. My family never truly saw me. They treated me as an outsider. But I don't need their approval anymore. I can do what I want, and I won't let anyone stop me. Amara's words rang out with strength, and those around her fell silent. She was no longer a weak girl. She was a strong, determined woman with influence. Hours later, the inauguration ended with applause and praise. Amara felt as if she had finally reclaimed herself not just as an adopted child, but as an independent, confident, and powerful woman. She knew she was on the right path. As for Charles and Lucy, they had never imagined that Amara could stand tall and succeed like this. They had thought she would forever be the loser, the one left out of the family's life. But now, they began to realize that Amara wasn't just surviving, she was thriving, and doing it better than any of them. One evening after the launch event, as Amara was enjoying a glass of wine, her phone rang again. This time, it was Charles. She answered, and his voice came through without the arrogance or disdain it once held. "Amara. You did a great job. I'm sorry for everything that happened before. Maybe you really do deserve to be part of the family." Amara smiled, but didn't reply right away. After a moment, she said, "Thank you, Charles. But I no longer need your apology. I found my own path." This time, when Amara spoke, there was no weakness in her voice. She had truly found her worth. And now, she would continue down that path, without looking back. The lesson from this story is resilience and self-belief. Amara, though rejected by both her family and society, never let the insults and isolation define her value. Instead, she found her inner strength and chose to transform her life by creating value for others. The story also emphasizes that love and acceptance must come from within, and sometimes, rejection from others becomes the very fuel that helps us rise stronger.
If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.